is a time when we find another piece, because I have the pleasure of introducing Margarita Briceño. It's a pleasure, and I say this because we had the pleasure of being studying together on the same road, so I'm very happy to introduce her. She's English teacher as profession, but since some time she gets involved into her passion, which is past life therapy, and she's also been studying. She's also a transpersonal psychologist. She made a transpersonal psychologist formation in university, and she studied with Dr. Brian Price and Dr. Jimena. So she brings a topic that's going to touch our hearts, the real shadow of love. Welcome, Margarita. Hello, Patty. Thank you very much for the introduction. You can hear me right? Okay, right? Can you hear me okay? Perfect. So, firstly, I'm very grateful to be sharing this space with great masters. To be honest, I feel very happy, and thank you, Patty. With Patty, we are soul friends, and we walk this path together. So I'm very happy for that introduction. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. Since I was a kid, I was interested by the human behavior, and to understand why that person behaves that way with no judgment. And also, I knew from my soul when I was a kid that our essence is love. Love. And also, I asked my grandfather. My grandfather, he worked at the jail, so I asked him to do an interview with the inmates. I was too young, so I couldn't do it. But I learned that behind behavior, there's an experience. There was a painful experience. Life set English teaching on my way. It was not my vocation, but it made me learn a lot of things, because I was in touch with different people, because I had classes in very poor schools. So how did I learn? I was reading Ryan Bryce as most of us, so I had to learn this. I didn't thought I was going to make a living out of this, but I went to the patterns, as Viviana was saying. Let's go to the origin of all of this. And when I learned the therapy, I signed up on learning, and I have it in my blood. I found one of my life loves, which is past life therapies. And I never thought that I could find myself with lost souls. Brian West, one of my great teachers, he tells in one of their conferences that he never met this topic. I thought the same. Maybe I'm not gonna walk into this, but it was the first thing that I faced when I was studying lost souls. So I'm going to tell you about this case, Constanza and Alejandro. And I'm going to start with this phrase from the movie Ghost, the shadow of love. So we have fought so much to leave this planet. It's very hard to live it. This is a phrase from the movie said by the Pratik Swayze character, right, Sam. And to be honest, for many people, by different reasons of life, it's very hard to move away from the loved ones. And because of those things, some part of your energy stays on those fragments here on this plane. It's very romantic to think that you have a loved one taking care of us or being present with us. But in reality, we don't not doing him any favor, because part of his energy is trapped and he cannot evolve. cannot, it doesn't allow the evolution process of the soul, and sometimes they take care of us so much that they don't let us to move forward. And finally, part of their energy, as Jasuris Cavoli said, because we learn to work lost souls with his technique, their psyche gets mixed with our psyche, so we are interrupted with our growth. So this is what happened to Constanza. Constanza comes to my consultation, my office, because in 2011 she lost her baby when he was born, and she had this sadness in his soul. Imagine one of your child died, might be one of the biggest pains that a human being can suffer, and that pain was still with her. One of well, that was his first motive of consultation, and the other one is that, and at work, she's a nurse, and she felt a huge reject towards a coworker, and she could not explain why she felt it, because and it was affecting her, because that person was a coworker at that time. So
We started the regression, but before that, we go to the interview, and here we start to unveil something very interesting. When I asked Constanza, is there some relationship that marked you? She says, see, I had a boyfriend in 2007. Let's remember the dates. In 2007 and 2011, she had that lost. And this boyfriend dies very young and 17 years old in a car accident. And then I ask her, and have you had paranormal experiences regarding aliens, etc.? And she says, you see, after the death of Alexandro, uh, sometimes there were people that would stop me in the street and say, Alejandro says hi, and she was very surprised. Sometimes the chairs in her at her work would move, and sometimes the boyfriend after and that then she had another boyfriend that is the parent of these babies. She would dream of a man that would say that Constanza is his and that he would never leave her, and all of that would indicate that Alejandra's presence was there. We started the first session, and Constanza, in her expanded conscious, we know that regression can be a parenthesis here, right? Conscious is an alter, the soul doesn't go anywhere, and the conscious is expanded, and you remember things that you didn't remember in the daily life. And Constanza goes to the most difficult time of the loss, that is the birth of her child. She works, as we've learned, with Dr. Cavoli and Dr. Centeno, an energy retrieval process with the conscious, how this is affecting her current state. And when I get to talk Constanza to talk with her baby soul, we got surprised. Guess who was this soul? It was Alejandro. When we work with lost souls, we generally ask the vocal calls to their patients to communicate with them. I asked the Constanza's vocal cords. I talked to Alejandro, and they tell us that he had lowered, and he was here, and he wanted to be with Constanza, and he fell in love, and that it wasn't his moment. And because of that, what happened to Connie had to happen when she lost her baby. It wasn't that moment, and had to come back, and he was very sad, and he was very hanging so much to it. And we had a talk that was very loving, and she was so surprised that she was in the energetic field, but in that moment he asked us to, he said that he didn't want to leave. During therapy, we as therapists try to negotiate with a lot of love and compassion with those souls so that they can go to the light. But we also respect their limit. We respect their decisions, and in that moment, he didn't want to leave. When Constanza gets out of the expanded state of conscious in the meditation, we were both really surprised. I must say that I love doing this therapy because it's not linear. It's something that connects us with the surprise that children feel when they're exploring. That's what happens with this therapy. And finally, we would both, well, I was very surprised. It was the first patient which I worked with lost souls, and you realize that sometimes the origin of not being able to move forward can be involved with intrusive energies that finally their souls as we and but they don't have a physical body and they get lost in the way. And with Constanza, by having this understanding, she could release that, and she realized that the presence of Alejandro didn't allow her to move on. We go to the next section, and then we work the co-worker thing. I knew that Constanza had a companion. There I have two patients, Constanza and Alejandra. Constanza goes to a past experience where this coworker was her second husband in wartime. What is the detail on what causes the conflict in this situation? Is that husband goes to war before he got married to Constanza. With the first husband of Constanza, he kills him. He assassinates him so that he could stay with her. Obviously, she doesn't know about this situation, and she comes telling that his husband had died in that war, and that time goes by and they get married. And when she dies, she realizes that this man had killed her first husband. So if she dies with that conflict, with that rage, that's where it all comes from. We go to space so that they can talk with the first husband, and guess who it was? The soul of that first husband. It was Alejandro. Do you see how it is all joining in? And he was involved in that past life. He couldn't complete his experience with Constanza. And then Constanza, when she found out about all of that, she started to release it and she could move on. In that moment, Alejandro asked me, he didn't want to leave. I must say that since it was one of the first, uh, I was just getting close with these entities. I was also respecting the process of Alejandra, but we knew that there was a moment where Constanza, it would get a moment where they will release, and we get to the third and last session. Immediately in that session, I knew that Alejandra Constanza, and then he would come, and they all knew what would happen. And I immediately asked for the vocal cords to Constanza to communicate with Alejandro and do the regression to Alejandro. Generally, to tell the people about our technique, when we work with lost souls, we take them to the moment of their death and to go. But I felt that we had to do the regression to Alejandro because part of their energy was trapped in an experience that he couldn't let go of Constanza. We go to that past life, and in that life, they were both a couple, and they had a child. They had a happy family. The conflict develops at the moment of the Alejandro's death, and you can see when Alejandro dies, they were both as a couple and their child playing in a park, and the little kid get loses the ball, and he goes to grab the ball, and he's crushed by a truck, and he dies with the suffering, with the loss, with the pain. So he was trapped. And in that moment, after living the experience of death, the session was really rough. he didn't want to leave, and then Constanza would beg him, like, go to the light. He was really afraid to go. Generally, when the work gets hard, we go to Saint Michael Archangel. And this moment, the first thing that went to my mind was to go to one of Constanza's masters. I say, is there any master, someone that a being that can help us? And sometimes therapists don't know it all, and we need help. And in this therapy, we're always going to have the help of the big fountain, of the source. And then comes Constanza. She felt really relieved when she felt her grandfather, and when she tells it, that is very impressive. And she says that her grandfather takes Alejandro from her shoulders and with a lot of compassion. That's what Alejandro needed, that hug. And they both went to the light and they sealed their path. I must say that that regression I did it one summer. The ones that live in Santiago of Chile in summer know that is really hot. The department where I did the regressions was really cold, and I had to go out to take sunshine. And I realized, yeah, it happened. Constanza felt relieved with a conscious that it was change that is very important. And then she said that is was so important to know where it came, like why she felt rejection of the colleague. And she realized that she had released that, and she realized Alejandro didn't let her move on, and now finally she could move on with her life. Right now she has a beautiful family with a beautiful daughter, and we always talk and we befriended, and we talk about this incredible experience.
That lets me with this learning that you have to let our loved ones go, even though it hurts. You have to leave that process and let them go. As I was saying in the beginning, it would be very nice to have our loves always practicing. No, that's a joke. But the thing is, part of love is learn how to say goodbye, as Gustavo Cerati says. Thank you. This was very short, very brief. I wanted to express my clinical case with lost souls. Thank you very much. I want to know if there's any questions.
Muy interesante.
Very
Margarita.
interesting, Margarita. Is there any question or reflection? Or we can leave it to the round
Muy
table.
interesante, Margarita.
Very interesting, Margarita.
Tenemos una pregunta para ti. Un comentario, sí. Tenemos un comentario.
We have a question for you, a comment.
Oh, Margarita, estoy
Margarita,
impactada y tu forma de
I'm
expresarlo
shocked,
me encanta.
and
Yo
the
creo que
way
estamos
you
todos
express it,
impactados,
I love it.
increíble.
We are all in shock,
Pero
but
que
it
retrata muy bien
seems incredible. But yeah, it
el tema de
pictures
las
very
almas
well
perdidas, ¿no es cierto? Y cómo se
the
trabajan
topic of lost souls and how
terapéuticamente.
to work them. And also learn how to let go and love those loved ones so we can move forward and they can also evolve.
Muchos comentarios para ti, muchas gracias Margarita.
Many
por tu
comments to you. Thank you very
experiencia,
much,
gracias por
Margarita.
compartir.
Thanks for sharing.
Muchas gracias Margarita.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Thank you. Thank you for having this space so we can talk about the things that happen in this beautiful therapy, which always surprises,
Nunca deja de sorprender.
right? Yes, it's never
Agradecemos
stops
entonces tu
surprising us.
participación.
We
las
appreciate
gracias.
your participation very much. Thank you again. Big hugs. See you again
Seguir con
tomorrow
nuestro
at the
programa,
round table.
entonces.